I want to talk about the Hunter x Hunter Greed Island arc. For me, this is the lowest point of the show. In this context, when I say low point, it doesn't mean bad. It's just a very average arc in comparison to the rest of this story, which has been really good overall. I'm only about 10 episodes into the Chimera Ant Island arc, but that one's been really good so far, and it's gone pretty balls out, which I've appreciated. There is some interesting stuff that goes on within the game, but I think in the context of the show as a whole, it really throws off the pacing when you've kind of sandwiched a training arc between the two best arcs of the series. I'm assuming the Chimera Ant Island arc will be either the best or second best, just based on how other people have talked about it and what I've seen so far. And I think a big part of what makes it feel odd pacing wise is that it's about 20 episodes and there's a little bit of story there within the game and them trying to win the game and all that. But a lot of it's training, and it feels weird when you double the longest training arc. And the Heaven's Arena training arc, they're still fighting the whole time. They're still battling. You're learning about Nen and world building. There is some world building in the Greed Island arc. Obviously, you learn that the Greed Island is not just a game, it's a real place within the world. And you get some developments with Gon's dad. But it also sort of feels like it grinds the story to a halt. And then I've talked about this in my other videos. I think the show functions best when you have Gon, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika together, because they just have really good chemistry and the four of them are unique and kind of balance each other out and play off each other. And when you have Gon and Killua, it's a little bit more stagnant as far as the dynamic between the two goes. And then you also end up with a little bit less that you can explore, because Gon is, you're kind of shown an optimist, and Killua, while he started out as the Dark Assassin, is coming more to Gon's side, and he's just kind of following him around. So there's not much drama or conflict between the two. You don't really explore a ton with just those two, character and philosophy wise. And my guess, if I had to speculate, and obviously this is just pure speculation, is that the author at the time was trying to plan out and storyboard the entire Chimera Ant Island arc and used the Greed Island arc as kind of a buffer. So while he was putting out these chapters that weren't as important, he was outlining and writing the entire Chimera Ant Island arc story, which obviously it being 61 episodes in the show, I'm assuming it was at least like 130 chapters for the manga. So that would make sense to me if that's why this arc feels kind of long and kind of drags a little bit in comparison to the rest of the story. And one other thing I think this arc kind of nails in the coffin for me, and this is a thing I've been mentioning, I think all season about Gon's dad, is that it kind of hurts the story when Gon's whole motivation is to find his dad. And his dad is like not just a deadbeat, but a super deadbeat and a deliberate one. Where in this arc, you find out that his dad made this game just as a clue for Gon. And this is when you get into really big plot coincidences and contrivances, kind of what is his thought process and plan. I said this in my last video, but I'll say it here in case you didn't see it. It's not just enough that his dad disappeared or he was out on a certain hunt and hadn't been able to come back, or he got stuck or injured, or he just felt like he had to complete his mission. He's gone out of his way to essentially make it impossible to find him. If you just think about the things that Gon has to go through to even have a chance of finding his dad, if he doesn't become a hunter, which his dad says he knew he would, even though he left him at like 3 years old, then he has zero chance of ever finding him. If he had just decided that he liked fishing, or he had failed his hunter exam, never had a chance to find him, even then, he had to figure out the box and somehow get his hands on a copy of this Greed Island game, which you saw in the auction was going for billions or tens of billions of dollars. So he had to find a way to get access to this game. Then he had to win the game, which to me, that's kind of the weakest part of this entire arc, is that Gon and Killua clear the whole game pretty much in a couple months when people have been stuck in the game for years. So he had to be able to get into the game to begin with and then be the one person to complete it, which was super unlikely given how young he was when the game was made and given the fact that there's presumably thousands of hunters at this point and none of them just teamed up to beat the game and escape. And even then, Gon has to figure out which card to take as part of his reward and then use that to try to go to his dad. But even then there's two options. And because he wanted to introduce his friend to his dad, it takes him to Kite instead. So again, he has no clue where to even begin looking. So you're just kind of stacking, 1 in however many million odds on top of one and however many 10,000, 100,000, 1 in a million odds or whatever, just over and over and over in order for Gon to even have a chance to find his dad. And that's not including the possibility of him dying along the way, or maybe he's just not that good of a hunter. So all of this to me really kind of does damage to both Gon's motivation because it's such an obscure, unlikely thing that he'll ever be able to do any of it. And then his dad, Ging, just as a person and a dad, to go out of his way to just disappear and make it that hard to find him that is virtually impossible. I'm assuming it's going to happen because he's the main character. It's an anime. That's his goal. But I just don't really like that aspect of the story. Like, I enjoy Kaluuya's part where he's just a friend to Gon and wants to adventure with him. Kurapika's got his revenge goal and kind of avenging his murdered tribe. Leorio has his obsession with becoming a doctor and money because not having money screwed him over in the past and obviously really hurt him when his friend died. Like, they all have good motivations, and I think Gon's motivation at the core is okay, but a lot of the circumstances around it I'm not a huge fan of, and this arc really emphasizes a lot of them. I also think it kind of hurts that we don't really have the same antagonist that we've had the whole time. Hisoka shows up and helps out. The Phantom Troop is kind of doing their own thing. They're trying to get Krollo's powers back for the guy who can remove the Nen curse. I believe they call it a Nen exorcism. And we do have the conflict with the bomber, which is fun, but he's kind of just a dick. And that fight I do enjoy. I'm glad they outsmart him and don't just brute force it. And then we get introduced to Biscuit Kruger. Very fun character. So those are my overall thoughts in the arc. I'm just going to go through the arc plot really quickly because, like I said, I don't think it's particularly deep this time. The first few episodes of the arc, this group is bidding on all the copies of Greed Island. They're offering a big reward to whoever goes in as a team, collects the 100 cards to beat the game, and brings them back out. They have tryouts. Obviously, Gon and Killua both make it. They're kind of learning their way around the game. You have to use cards to attack and defend and transport yourself. You can use your fighting abilities, but the cards are kind of the dominant force on the island. And Biscuit Kruger follows them and sees that they're kind of just naively wandering around without really a care or concern for their safety. I'll be honest, I kept seeing her in the theme song, but she hadn't shown up. And then you see her following them. And I was like, oh, I wonder if she's going to be Gon's love interest. And then you find out she's 67. I was kind of laughing at myself about that one. So they run into her, and we get a few episodes of pretty hardcore training. They learn more of the nuances of Nen and how to defend themselves in certain body parts, enhancing certain body parts and power-ups. Meanwhile, the other plot is we see the bomber and his group are killing and blackmailing the other players and taking their cards. I enjoyed the bomber and his arc, and he's just a prick the whole time. And obviously he's the one that Gon's competing with to end the game. So it's a fun little conflict, but it is kind of on the back burner for a lot of the story. We get a pretty funny scene where they teleport themselves to Hisoka, and he's naked and Bisky's checking out his dong. And then Hisoka agrees to help them with their little journey, because in the meantime, he's looking for the Nen exorcist so that he can fight Krollo. And obviously, Hisoka's always entertaining. And again, we find out that this guy that they had to beat in volleyball was put there by Ging. And again, it's just another one of those things where it's like, does he actually want Gon to find him? But they use teamwork and essentially a miracle to win this volleyball game. And it's kind of funny because the volleyball game is probably the most intense part of this arc. And I don't know if Spy Family was making fun of this specific show, but the volleyball episode of Spy Family is hilarious. And it's kind of similar to this, where some people are super powerful and they're doing like the Super Saiyan animation shit and the dramatic music. But obviously it's Spy Family, so it's played for comedy. So after like the 3 or 4 episode volleyball game with Razor, they run into the bomber who wants to make a deal with them, and he's trying to use hostages and threaten them. And they meet with Sagara and they're like, hey, can you try to run? And essentially they're trying to keep the cards spread out because they don't want the bomber and his group to win the game. So there's a lot of cat and mouse and chasing people around and avoiding people, trying to find the last couple special cards. Eventually, as they're both getting close and they kind of each have cards that each other needs, Gon, Killua, and Bisky separate the 3 bombers and fight them one-on-one. Bisky and Killua fuck their people up. I was dying when she revealed her true form as this big-ass muscular chick, when most of the time she looks like a little lowly girl. I really enjoyed this part of the fight with Gon and the bomber, where he sacrifices one forearm and lets his other arm get super damaged just to land a kick on the bomber. I kind of wish it had more consequence, because essentially he finishes up this fight and then just gets healed right away. I think it would have been neat if that was something that he had to deal with, at least for some kind of amount of time, but I get why they didn't, considering the Chimera Ant Island. They're already too strong for him, so having one arm, he'd be totally fucked. But this was a pretty cool moment. And I thought it was cool how he won, that he had a trap plan the whole time, and then they just kind of arrest him instead of executing them because he's a shonen protagonist. And then they ended up getting the last couple cards they needed. They do a quiz, and Gon finally wins the game. They say goodbye to Bisky, who trained him. Gon uses the card that he got to pursue his dad, and they end up meeting Kite, who's going to be their leader for the Chimera Ant Island arc. So yeah, that's the Greed Island arc. I know I wasn't super in-depth with this one. Honestly, I just didn't feel like it warranted it. Like the York New City arc, I felt like it was important to go almost episode by episode because there's so much going on. This one is much more straightforward, much more your typical kind of training arc. There's a little bit of story mixed in with the bomber and Gon and Killua, growing up a little bit, getting a little bit closer. They found a new friend, but a lot of this arc really feels self-contained. Like, yeah, Hisoka popped in. We see Chrollo's going to get his Nen back. Bigger picture, Gon is a step closer to finding his dad. But overall, this story just kind of functions on its own. And I think it's probably the least interesting and least important. And something that is odd about this too is that the training is kind of built into the other arcs, where they're kind of having to learn as they go because they keep facing stronger opponents. This one feels more like a training arc with a bit of story thrown in, as opposed to a story arc with a little bit of training thrown in. So for me, I think that's what makes this one kind of the weakest. Again, not bad. Definitely my least favorite. And this is sort of one of those where I was like, I wonder if this could have been accomplished in like 6-8 episodes. And instead they kind of spread it out, dragged it, and gave themselves time to set up for the Chimera Ant Island arc. And unfortunately, because they took away so many characters, you sort of lose all the interesting dynamics that the show has worked so hard to set up throughout the first 60 episodes. So a bit of a bummer in that regard too. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do videos for the Chimera Ant Island arc. If I do, I think I'll probably try to do 1/3 of the arc for each video, which would put me at about 20 episodes. I'll probably not be exact because I want to pick good stopping points. I also don't want to do one video about 60 episodes. Even doing 2 videos of about 30 each seems like a lot, because the Chimera Ant Island arc, I'm about 10 episodes in, has been pretty dense, and there's a lot going on and a lot of interesting stuff happening. We'll see what exactly I do with that, if anything. It's gotten super high praise. Many people saying it's their favorite arc of any anime, but that's it for me on the Greed Island arc. It's fine. I think it causes issues with the pacing, with Gon's dad. It kind of sucks not seeing the characters that are all really interesting for at least 20 episodes. Now going into the Chimera Ant Island arc, more like 30. I'm assuming it's going to be 40 or 50 if they come back at all. Not great, not terrible. Functions as a bridge between the two best arcs. So we'll see what happens. If you've seen the show, let me know what you think. I try to respond to all the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.